I've watched the rest of Daredevil Born Again, and it somehow got worse. Episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again continues to ruin the original show and its characters. One thing I failed to mention in episode 2 in the last video is that there's no cameras in the subway, despite this being New York City in modern times. The courtroom scene in this episode is not only the worst courtroom scene in the entire Daredevil show, but one of the worst I've ever seen. I'm sorry, Joker 2. Perhaps I treated you too harshly. The beginning of this scene doesn't really add much. It's just Matt cross-examining the corrupt cop and just repeats the information that I already know, and he just denies ever seeing the witness that night. Just a very redundant scene. But in the middle of the case, Cherry's getting the witness to the trial safely by having the witness get in his van, and then Cherry's tracked by the corrupt cop who was just getting cross-examined and searches the van and finds nothing. What was his plan? To kill the witness in broad daylight? Turns out the witness switched to a taxi off screen. And then during the witness's testimony, he lies and said that he was never there because someone intimidated him, someone got to him. At this moment, Matt should have appealed to the judge and treat Nikki as a hostile witness. But instead, Matt just goes full stupid and gets pissed off and tries pressing him despite being told to stop multiple times.
Maybe there's a paper trail, some kind of CI registration form or a record of payments or something. We get that, we can recall him as a hostile witness.
I looked. There's nothing.
Motherfucker, what Nikki just did was by definition a hostile witness. What more proof do you need? He just embarrasses himself in front of the court. Nikki admitted under oath that he's a confidential informant, yet there's no paper trail. This makes the corrupt cop look bad because he illegally hired a CI. Since there's no camera footage of any of this happening, which is just dumb, you're pretty much going off of what Hector and the corrupt cop have to say. And it looks really bad on the cop that he has an illegal CI. I'm listing all of this shit out to show you all the things that Matt could have done or mentioned during this case, because what he's about to do is so dumb. Then because the witness lied, and also that Matt is a dumbass, during Hector Ayala's cross-examination, he reveals that Hector is the White Tiger. What the fuck? Matt, of all people, should know the dangers of people knowing your secret identity, yet he just completely outs him and puts his family in danger. Which, by the way, in episode 2, they decided that this key info of Hector being the White Tiger is not admissible to this case somehow because he wasn't wearing his magical amulet. Hell, it just adds more charges to Hector, and not only will he go down for the murder of the cop, but for his vigilante stuff. But nah, it's apparently irrelevant. And now the judge and the prosecutor are pissed at Matt because they just made that info not admissible to the case and now he's bringing it back up. Matt made a mockery of his court. The judge should have declared a mistrial because of what Matt presented in this piece of evidence, which is a trial by ambush, and the judge doesn't declare a mistrial because the White Tiger info is going to be relevant for the rest of the case, which is the point of a mistrial. White Tiger was never used in anyone's statements or arguments up to this point. I almost forgot to mention that this violates lawyer-client privilege. Jesus fucking Christ. And then after this, Hector's like, bro, you should have told me about this, what the fuck? And Matt is like, well, at least you're not in jail. Motherfucker, you just signed his death warrant the moment you revealed to everyone that he's White Tiger. And then a bunch of witnesses come up to the stand and share their anecdotes of White Tiger being a good guy. And the prosecutor is like, dude, none of this matters because just because he's a good person doesn't mean he can't do bad things. But Hector wins this case somehow. Then after this, he should have left the country since tons of people want him dead, but nah, he's just gonna go back to superheroing like nothing happened. And he ends up getting shot in the head by some random dude. Even though he's been a vigilante for a while, he has zero awareness of his surroundings. And he's just running down this random street like no stealth, no nothing, not being in alleyways, not laying low in the dark, not even being on any rooftops. He's just running down a random street. And we're led to believe that this is the Punisher, but it's not him. And Hector would probably be alive right now if Matt wasn't so stupid in this entire courtroom scene and just didn't do the dumbest shit imaginable. Episode 4 begins with Matt at forensics where he confirms Hector's death and has zero guilt or shame despite him being the big reason for his demise. In this episode, there's a side plot involving a random dude named Leroy who's caught stealing food and wants probation, but the best he's gonna get is 10 days in jail and he constantly acts like an asshole. This subplot exists just to basically show how flawed the system is, but it just falls apart in execution when this dude constantly keeps repeating the same behavior that got him in jail. well. All of his previous crimes can't be the system's fault alone. The dude has a victim mentality and Matt should have seen through it, but instead just feels bad for him. I think what the writers were trying to get at would have landed better if we were given more time with Leroy, and even if he is a flawed individual, we could sympathize with him. But with how it's executed, he comes off as a complete jerk with not enough development to make me feel bad for him. Also, some subtlety would have been nice, because he's just a mouthpiece for the writers and it comes off as inauthentic. Overall, just a very forced and undercooked subplot. It also references Secret Invasion.
Could it have been a scroll?
Can we please decanonize that show? I don't care for Kingpin's subplot at all. He just shouldn't even be in the show and it just exists to undermine season 3. And he randomly gets sang to twice. He just constantly acts like a bumbling idiot, and I just don't care about the marriage counseling shit. It just makes him look super weak. And I just don't understand what Kingpin's main goal is in this show, and we're 4 episodes in. Matt then finds the bullet casing from Hector's death and feels the Punisher logo engraved on it, which then leads him to go to the Punisher, which is the big scene for this episode. How did Frank not recognize Matt's voice? He also had plenty of time to see who exactly it was in his place, and it's clearly Matt. Where exactly did he come from? Where was he hiding? Matt already pinged him with his radar senses. I don't know why he was so caught off guard. How did Matt even know where Frank was? Matt tries lecturing Frank and making him feel guilty for Hector's death because the shell casing had a Punisher logo on it, even though Matt should be the one guilty for his death. Also, Frank doesn't give a shit about corrupt cops going around committing crimes while using his logo. You think that'd be plenty of fuel for Frank to go kill these guys, but for some reason he just doesn't care. And Matt is like, you could use your resources to save people. As he's looking at his guns, like, dude, you don't like killing people, and that's what Frank does. You quit being Daredevil because you almost killed Bullseye. I don't get your point. Frank then digs into Matt's weakness of letting Bullseye live and implies that Matt came to ask permission to kill someone, which is weird because Matt hasn't had any conflict about wanting to kill someone at this point of the show. So who's Frank even implying that Matt wants to kill? If he's talking about Bullseye, Matt already tried to kill him, but he had layers of plot armor. Also, why is Frank trying to encourage Matt to kill people? And then Frank brought up Foggy out of nowhere, which was just such a dick move. Despite this scene being very flawed, this is probably my favorite scene due to how great the acting is between John Bernthal and Charlie Cox. And at the end, they highlight that Matt is probably going to become Daredevil soon. Overall, not as bad as episode 3, but that's not really saying much. The episode starts with Matt trying to get a bank loan from Kamala Khan's father, Yusuf, and then out of nowhere, Matt starts going on about the system and it feels very unnatural and the music's so goddamn overbearing.
People like you and me, Mr. Khan. So yeah, we may be over leveraged for now.
Then the bank robbery ensues, and Matt straight up tells his girl to call 911 without even explaining why.
Kirsten, call 911.
And then he decides to stroll on into the bank, which the front entrance was unlocked by the way, instead of, I don't know, sneaking in and doing some stealth shit. And the robbers are trying to find the bank manager, but he just so happens not to come into work that day and is the only one who can open the vault. This is so stupid. Then these robbers decide to go into a separate room and take off their masks. There's windows right next to you. They sit in this room and the main robber talks to the police and tries negotiating with the detective to get what he wants. Why isn't there a negotiator there to talk to him? They gave the negotiating to a random detective and she starts threatening the dude who has all of the hostages with him. And she acts all surprised when he says that he has hostages with him and it's like, yeah, that's the whole point of negotiating with him. Meanwhile, Yusuf lies to the robbers and tells them that he can open the vault. Matt then tells one of the robbers that he needs to use the restroom and he ends up taking out both the guards and opens the vault, and Yusuf somehow doesn't suspect that Matt is a superhero. Why do they care so much about taking him to the restroom? This is a fucking robbery. Just let him piss himself. Maybe they didn't think twice about it because he's blind, but these are supposed to be hardened criminals.
What's your status? What's your status, lads?
I needed the bank manager to be sufficiently motivated to open the vault. He is now. We're almost in.
Why are you talking to me then?
Motherfucker, you literally just asked for their status, and then you're like, why are you talking to me then? Like, bro, this is stupid. Also, I just didn't feel like going back to my room to record that line, so here's some random relaxing footage. They end up getting the diamond that the robbers were looking for. After a bunch of bullshit negotiation stuff, the cops are like, we're going in, and the detective's like, bruh, there's hostages in there, and they just didn't seem to give a shit about them. And so Matt and Yusuf go back up, and the robbers are like, what the fuck happened? And Matt says to let the hostages go, and he'll give him the diamond. The main robber says he's gonna shoot him in the head if he doesn't give him the diamond, and Matt gives him a bag with the diamond. Then the SWAT team goes into the bank and takes out some of the robbers. The main robber snuck into a room and put on a cop uniform, but Matt knows what he did, so he follows him and puts a mask on and fights him. And somehow this random mobster is somehow holding his own against Daredevil. This shouldn't even be close. Also, the show continues to have badly edited fights. We learned that one of the people working at the bank was in on it, but the bag Matt gave them didn't have the diamond, and Matt goes back to the bank and returns the diamond to Yusuf. Yet another dumb episode. In episode 6, we go back to the Kingpin subplot, and it's just the same shit. The show treats him as if he doesn't know how politics work, yet we literally saw him game the system multiple times in the OG show. He also just doesn't know how to talk to people. There's a scene toward the beginning of the episode where Matt's girlfriend was spouting off cliche shit we've heard about vigilantes wearing masks and if it allows us to be our true selves. This dialogue is so painfully unsubtle, and it's obvious that it'll be important later in the episode. She also asks Matt if she could meet the Punisher, which at first I thought she was joking, but no, she's dead ass. I don't think I need to explain how stupid this is. Kingpin then gets wind of all the murals around the walls around the city that were painted with the blood of at least 60 victims by a sanitation worker. He then gets a hold of the NYPD and tells them not to let word out about Muse and the missing people. However, not too long after this, Cherry got a hold of this information and the BB report interviewed people off the street and they knew about it. So it just makes this scene kinda pointless. And speaking of the BB report segments, a lot of the people in these scenes are very much pro-vigilante and continues to make me question how Fisk even won despite hating on superheroes so much during his campaign. Meanwhile, at Matt's law office, Angela shows up and tells Matt about how Hector was looking into these missing people and asks Matt to continue Hector's work despite him only being a lawyer, a blind lawyer at that, and then gets mad at him for refusing to help. Of course, we the audience know that he's Daredevil, but she doesn't know, so it just seems weird of her to ask. Then these girls go up to a random dude and think he's Muse, and Muse is all decked out in his costume, and I'm surprised he hasn't been caught if he's going around wearing that outfit in public. Kingpin now wants to create an anti-vigilante task force because of the Muse situation, despite Muse not being a vigilante. It wants these cops to have power and no body cams. I don't see how this wouldn't get thrown out considering how many issues it would obviously cause. The cops he wants on his team are the cops with the Punisher tattoos. These cops don't like him for obvious reasons, but then Kingpin gives a really cute speech, which is enough to convince them. Matt then gets a call saying that Angela hasn't been seen since she left to Matt's office. So he finally suits up as Daredevil again, yay! And he starts doing parkour with shit CGI. Muse has already started getting to work on Angela when Matt finally shows up, and there's so many times in this fight scene where Matt could have easily knocked out Muse and saved Angela, but decided not to do that and drag out the fight for whatever reason. There's also this funny scene where Matt is just sitting there getting kicked in the face and not bothering to block or counterattack. Amazing choreography. There's also another scene where Matt is just standing over Angela and does fuck all. He finally temporarily incapacitates Muse and saves Angela. There's also a scene of Kingpin beating the shit out of a guy who Vanessa cheated on him with, intertwined with the Muse fight to draw a shitty parallel. Another bad episode. In the beginning of episode 7, Kingpin finds out that Daredevil is back in action. There's also this really shit ADR line.
Says she actually escaped from Muse.
She's still alive.
She lost a lot of blood.
Straight up cuts off Kingpin's line. Heather digs into Matt for being checked out all the time and says that he puts himself in danger like the bank heist. My brother in Christ, he's blind. How was he supposed to know what the hell was going on at the bank? It's almost like she's victim blaming him. Even then, eyewitnesses show that he actually did plenty of good during the bank heist, due to the fact that Matt gives zero fucks about hiding his blindness and his secret identity. Matt goes to his law firm, and we get some really forced conflict between Matt and Cherry, because Cherry gets mad at him for doing Daredevil stuff despite the cops not really doing shit, and because Matt dressed up as Daredevil, he was able to save a child and expose Muse's hideout, which led to the cops getting a lead on who Muse really is. So there's literally no good reason for him to get mad at Matt other than forced conflict nonsense. I can understand him not being a fan of his vigilante work, but at least help him take down Muse for Christ's sake. In the next scene, Kingpin is reminiscing about how Daredevil destroyed his business, and it reminded me of how smart he used to be in the original show compared to how stupid he is in the new show. Because as I've said many times in this video, the show makes him out as if he doesn't know the game when we have 3 seasons worth of that. Then the next scene is with Heather and Muse is very obsessed with her despite us the audience not not seeing any other sessions together. And he slowly reveals that he's Muse, and Heather does a really shit job at de-escalating the situation, even though she should probably know plenty about psychology and how people like Muse think. He ends up holding her hostage for his next art project, and there's no one else in that building. She has no secretary. None of this plotline was built up at all and is extremely undercooked. Hell, it wasn't cooked at all. They just shoehorned Muse into the plot of this season with zero development. And they also throw in a line that Muse did taekwondo when he was 16, as if that justifies him being able to stand a chance against Daredevil. Then it cuts to Kingpin and Detective Woman, and they figure out who Muse is. The next scene is Matt sneaking into Muse's lair, because Angela told him that Muse was painting faces or something like that, and that he would talk about him. Matt then decides to put his fingerprints all over those papers, straight up incriminating himself, and he figures out that Heather is the one on the blood paintings, even though he just rubbed his fingers on splotches of blood, and it's a 2D painting. He also somehow didn't hear this cop walking into the room, and it just so happens to be the same corrupt cop from the previous episodes. His powers throughout the season have been so inconsistent. Sometimes he can hear people from far away, and then other times he gets snuck up on despite having a radar and being able to hear heartbeats. It reminds me of how in The Boys, they established Homelander's powers in season 1, just for the writers to forget 70% of the time that he has super hearing or X-ray vision.
Anybody who needs a mask is a coward.
You do realize that you're in a universe with tons of costumed heroes who wear masks, right? Also, Muse didn't bother to put anything on or in her mouth to silence her. Also, what is taking these cops so long to get into the building and save Heather? Muse is about to kill her when Matt crashes through the window and a mediocre fight ensues. Bad editing all around. There's also a part where Matt slams Muse and just decides to let him go instead of holding him down and beating him. Like, he legit doesn't do shit for like 5 seconds, and it gives Muse enough time to grab a knife and almost kill Heather, but he uses his grappling hook thingy and continues to fight him until Heather shoots Muse dead. The cops say that Daredevil was at the crime scene, but Fisk spins a story about how his anti-vigilante task force took out Muse, and still continues to call Muse a vigilante despite him not being a vigilante. What a waste of a cool character. At the beginning of episode 8, Bullseye gets put into Gen Pop. There's also a neat shot here. And then Heather talks about what happened last episode with her, Daredevil, and Muse, and has the most bad faith interpretation imaginable.
Not sure you can put Muse and Daredevil in the same category.
I'm not so sure that you can't. They're just these underdeveloped boys hiding behind masks, trying to make it look like something more sophisticated.
Muse tried to kill you, Daredevil saved you.
I saved me. They were both out there for themselves.
Motherfucker, how can you get that perspective from what you saw? The fuck? He was really in it for himself when he stopped Muse from killing you. And also, Daredevil's been operating for a while now and has saved countless lives. Then Kingpin sends one of his men to Matt's apartment because Heather lives there and gives her an invitation to Kingpin's party. I don't know if I mentioned this in this review or my previous Daredevil video, but for context, Heather, Matt's girlfriend, has been Kingpin and Vanessa's therapist for marriage counseling, and also just so happened to be Muse's therapist. Yeah, I know, it's very contrived. And this is also the moment where Matt figures out that Fisk is one of Heather's clients, and Heather doesn't see how this could affect Matt, even though Matt was a part of many court cases that involved taking Fisk down, and Fisk tried killing his friends. Then it cuts to Matt at his law office where he's told that Bullseye wants to talk to him, and that Mayor Fisk was the one who moved Bullseye into Gen Pop, which I don't think the mayor has that power, but it's nowhere near as bad as the other parts of the show where he's reaching way beyond his boundaries as a mayor, so I give it a pass. Matt snaps at one of his clients because his client is clearly lying, and he's taken aside by Kirsten and dumps a bunch of shit on her.
We put Poindexter away and it changes nothing.
I think life in prison is a pretty huge change. He can't hurt anyone anymore, at least no one on the outside.
Alright, we defend Hector Ayala, he's still murdered.
You revealed his secret identity to the world and also fumbled every step of the way throughout that court case, you dipshit. You got him killed.
Probably by the same cops who were out there assaulting citizens, by the way.
If only Matt had another way of getting rid of these corrupt cops. Also, these cops wouldn't be alive right now if Frank actually gave a shit.
Leroy Bradford goes away for eating a box of caramel corn.
Yeah, because he kept re-offending. Even then, he's gonna be in jail for like a week. As I said before, all of his other crimes can't be the system's fault alone.
Heather's assaulted by Muse, and she thinks Fisk is right.
Honestly, that's the only valid thing he said in this scene. Then Matt goes to see Bullseye, and Bullseye is like, if you can help me get out, then I'll tell you everything. But Matt is like, nah, which I don't get why he wouldn't try to get some answers by helping Bullseye. Maybe Bullseye is lying, but we don't see Matt using his super hearing, so I don't know. It would take 2 seconds for Matt to check his heartbeat, but we don't see that at all.
But I need to be outside. I don't trust you for a second.
Matt smashes Bullseye's head against the table and says that Bullseye did it, even though there should be cameras in there. There's this cool little wonder at Kingpin's party. Then we cut back to Bullseye getting patched up from Matt beating him, and his hands are completely free. There's restraints on his arms, but that's about it. There's also only one guard with him, despite them knowing how dangerous Bullseye is, and he ends up escaping by spitting his knocked out tooth at the guard and using his free hands to escape his restraints. Do I even need to explain how stupid this is? He takes the cop's outfit and ends up escaping on a bus, and I'm surprised none of these guards on that bus recognized him. Matt arrives at Kingpin's party, and he ends up putting it together that Vanessa was the one who ordered Bullseye to kill Foggy. Huh? Why the fuck would Bullseye ever work with her? If anything, he would kill her to get back at Kingpin. He also decides to intervene in Kingpin's dancing to tell her that he knows that she did it. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Matt? Bullseye ends up infiltrating Kingpin's party and tries to assassinate Kingpin, but Matt takes a bullet for him. I don't know why Bullseye didn't just rechamber his sniper and shoot Kingpin in his melon, but okay. The opening scene to episode 9 is probably the worst scene in the entire show.
The whole FBI corruption scandal agent, Nadeem, all that. It's why my husband was acquitted.
Kingpin was the one who orchestrated all of this shit in the FBI. Nadeem's video is the reason for Fisk's arrest. How the fuck would he get acquitted? Again, undermining the entirety of season 3. Oh my Jesus Lord. Also, she wants to get Bullseye to kill Foggy because he was working on a case that could expose her. Again, why the fuck would Bullseye ever agree to help Vanessa? He would kill her. In the present, Matt is just talking about how Vanessa was behind Foggy's death, and everyone just assumes that it's the drugs talking.
Fisk.
He saved his life.
I heard someone scream gun. I just reacted.
Did you forget that you're supposed to fake your blindness? You shouldn't have been able to even see Fisk. Also, no one yelled gun. Fisk wants his task force to go after vigilantes with no body cams, no due process, no warrants, etc., which he obviously can't do because checks and balances exist.
Sir, that not only goes against the operating principles of the NYPD, it's illegal.
He also wants to shut down the tunnels and close the bridges, but the only way he could do that is if there was a huge threat to public safety. So he turns off the power to New York City. Gallo talks to Sheila about how bad Fisk is, and it's obvious that he's going to be killed later. During the power outage, Matt leaves the hospital because he hears Kingpin's goon coming after him. Also, this guy straight up just shows the syringe where people could see it. Matt goes to his house for some reason, despite pretty much being a wanted man. When Matt enters his house, Frank is just there for reasons we'll learn later. Frank asks Matt why he took a bullet for Kingpin, and he just responds with,
That is a good question.
and we never get any follow-up to this. And Frank just says that he's there to protect him. Why the fuck is Frank just chilling in his apartment? Why isn't he at the hospital that Matt is at? Frank mentions that there's a cop van outside of the building, which means that they just saw Matt walking around in a nightgown and didn't bother to arrest him. They enter Matt's apartment, and Matt comes through the top window dressed as Daredevil, and there was ample opportunity for these guys to shoot Matt many times while he was just standing there in the middle of the room, but decide not to. Like, Matt drops into the middle of the room, these guys turn around and just stand there doing nothing, and it gives Frank enough time to sneak up on these idiots. And in this action scene, they for some reason threw a bunch of slow-mo anytime it cuts back to Frank, which is just annoying. Also, Frank allows himself to get shot in this stupid scene where he shoots a guy 3 times in the head, despite us knowing that Frank's a pretty precise killer, so he wouldn't just shoot this dude 3 times in the head. There's also this really shit ADR line.
Frank, stop!
Matt and Frank decide to give this random cop enough time to pull out his radio because the plot needs to happen. Matt and Frank bicker about killing these cops, and I just don't think that it's in character for Frank to try to tempt Matt to kill these cops. Or tempt him to kill anybody. He's been doing that throughout this season, and it's just not in character.
May I see some? That Matt Murdock. Is She know you're here? Yeah, that's what I thought.
What does that have to do with this?
Come on, Karen, he's good. Don't throw that away from me.
Then the cops toss a grenade into his apartment. They jump out of this fucking building, land on a car, and just walk it off like they're John Wick.
We should be fucking dead, man.
Not to mention, when they swing off the building, Matt is somehow carrying Frank's body weight during this shit. Like, I don't even know how they're just walking this off. Then Karen pulls up and they hop in her car and head back to Frank's base. And we learn that Karen was the one that told Frank to go to Matt's apartment to protect him. And then Matt and Karen end up piecing out. The scene between Matt and Karen is nice and all, but are we just gonna forget the fact that she straight up just left Matt after Foggy died? They go through Foggy's file and figure out that this Red Hook port thingy is in its own separate port where the government has no jurisdiction and isn't connected to the US, which is just really dumb because free ports still have laws and aren't free from the authorities. Somehow, Foggy was the only one who figured this out. Why does barely anyone know about this port? And so Kingpin's grand plan is to try to build his own city-state free from the US government, yet he already has a stupid amount of power just as mayor according to the events of the show. So his entire plan is just a gigantic waste of resources for shit that he can already do. Hell, it would just be 10 times easier for him to do criminal activities if he wasn't mayor. I just don't understand why he became mayor when he could just do the same shit he's been doing for years under the radar. Matt and Karen go to check out Red Hook, which is the port thingy that Kingpin's been trying to do this entire season, which I haven't really discussed it because I just find Kingpin's part of the plot to be dumb and uninteresting. Frank ends up going there too, and he just charges in with zero plan and has no guns with him, and he ends up getting captured like a dumbass. Gallo ends up getting kidnapped by Kingpin, and Kingpin proceeds to kill Gallo by crushing his skull with his bare hands. It's so over the top, stupid, and doesn't mesh with the tone of the show at all. Matt and Karen go to Red Hook, and Karen is like, you'll die if you take on this entire base, and Matt's like, we're gonna take this city back and we need an army. Also, Karen says this.
It'll be Josie's all over again.
Bruh, Matt saved dozens of people by stopping Bullseye. If this was Karen from the original show, she would have never said this in a million years. Then Kingpin turns the power back on, and Heather joins Kingpin's administration, as if she wasn't unlikable enough. Kingpin then gives a speech and mentions that Gallo retired, which he shouldn't even have mentioned Gallo considering how it could bring unwanted attention. He then makes vigilantism illegal, even though it already is illegal, and declares martial law, which he doesn't have the power to do that. Matt and Karen assemble their dream team at Josie's bar, and Matt gives a little speech, and the show ends. Yay! Also, Frank escapes. What a complete disaster of a season. This show completely ruins what came before by completely character assassinating Matt, Karen, Foggy, Kingpin, Vanessa, Bullseye, and Frank. The plot is a complete mess with most of the episodes wasting time and having nothing to do with the main plot, which sucks because that wasted screen time could have went to something more important. The action scenes are a complete downgrade in every sense of the imagination with bland or outright bad choreography with terrible editing, and the only one take that they do in this show is filled with inferior choreography and is caked up in awful CGI. The overall style and presentation doesn't at all hold a candle to the original show. Despite having 10 times the budget, it looks super cheap and boring. The music and the overall use of the soundtrack is way worse, with them constantly spamming the show's theme at any point, which not only kills the importance of when the music is used, but it also comes off as super manipulative. Outside of the main theme, the other music choices are just as obnoxious, cringe, and sometimes inappropriate. I really wanted this show to be good. I've waited years for them to revive the original series, despite there being zero chance for it to happen. I love this show and its characters, however I love it too much to fall for member berries, references, and returning characters to see what this show truly is. It's a bad show, and I should have been careful for what I wished for. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later.